I guess you can see me, Joe. Good evening.
Yeah, you're going to see my eyes dotting back and forth, so
All right.
if you
Well,
get to know me, just let you know.
it's good to see you again, and you look exactly going this way as you do in person. Let me introduce, this is Joe Carcia, pronounced like Marcia, right?
Yes, yeah. It's an Italian name. Just don't call me late for dinner, that's all.
Joe is the station manager for W1AW, and also the trustee for W1AW, and I've had the pleasure of being there, I think, 5 or 6 times now, Joe, and it's always been such a delight, and one of the highlights of my career, and it's a delight to have you here tonight for us. Your own.
Oh, it's my speed now? All set?
Yep. Let her go.
Oh, my name! Well, good evening, everyone. I first want to say thank you very much to Paul and to John Associate for setting everything up. Also, my name is Joe Carcia, NJ1Q. I'm the station manager, trustee, chief cook and bottle washer here at W1AW. And thank you very much to the Gwinnett ARS for this opportunity to present to you W1AW. Now, before I get into the meat of things, I feel I should talk about the station a little bit, this actual building. Because as we've discovered throughout the years, there's a few misconceptions about this particular building. I'm not sure if maybe you know this, but this particular building, this site here in Newington, was actually built to be the radio station for the ARRL. Now, we had an original site about 5 miles to the north of here. Its original location was on Brainerd Road in Hartford. And that site was destroyed in what was called the Great Flood of 1936. The Great Flood of 1936 took place in March, and essentially the flood began at the top of the Connecticut River, where it begins in Canada, of all places. Now, at that time, it was in March, we had snowstorms, and we had ice, and then we had huge amounts of rain. So pretty much all those factors combined didn't leave a lot of room or places for all this water to come through. So it began to travel down the Connecticut River. Well, the Connecticut River starts in Canada, intersects Vermont, New Hampshire, right through Massachusetts, right through Connecticut, and dumps into Long Island Sound. Well, that flood took out the original station. In fact, we have some pictures, some aftermath pictures, that show the water line 8 feet above the edge of the building. Now, at that time, we were not running as W1AW, we were actually 1NK and 1AW. So the thought was to not necessarily rebuild the station. I mean, after all, we weren't too far from the river damaged the station, and the thought was, well, if we rebuild the station and this happens again, what do we do? So at that time, the NRL decided to find a place a little farther away from the Connecticut River, and they settled on this property here in Newington. Now, this occurred in 1936. They had purchased the land, about 7¼ acres here, from the Starr family. And if any of you have ever been up here, you probably noticed our side street here is named Starr, S-T-A-R-R. Well, that's named after the family that the land was purchased from. Originally, it was Orchard Lane, and it was literally a dirt road. There wasn't really a lot going on here in Newington. So the ARL decided, okay, this is probably a great spot. We have this property, it's pretty quiet, there's not many people around us, it's more farmland than anything else, and they began construction of this building. Now, I have heard some tour guides in the past refer to this as Hiram's home. Well, yes, figuratively it's his home because its license call is named after him, but Hiram actually passed away in February of 1936. He never saw the destruction of the original radio station, let alone the construction of this particular one. At the time, Hiram was still living on Park Road in West Hartford, and there's actually pictures of his home along with old Betsy, his rotary spark gap transmitter, that appeared in a 1920 issue, I think it's July, 1920 issue of QST, if you ever wanted to check that out. So he never saw the destruction of the station, again, let alone the construction of this one. Now, all this occurred in 1936. They began construction of this building, and they decided, they being the ARL, they wanted to hold a call sign in memorial. Now, at the time, the FCC really didn't do that. If someone passed away, and the call sign was just kind of lost to history. So we had petitioned the FCC at the time to hold the call sign in memorial. And so we have been active as W1AW since 1938. Now, our inauguration, the formal inauguration of the station took place on September 2nd, 1938. The significance of September 2nd is that is Hiram Percy Maxim's birthday. And in fact, this year we're celebrating 150 years of Hiram Percy Maxim's birth. But anyway, September 2nd was his birthday. The inauguration took place in 1938. However, we were actually operating as W1AW as early as July of 1938 from this location. At that time, we were sending out code practice and bulletins on, I believe, at least 5 different amateur frequencies. No, I think it was 4 frequencies at the time. And to the service of all amateur radio operators, not necessarily just ARL members. Now, over time, the station has changed. In 1967, when they built the first part of ARL headquarters right across the parking lot, and Paul can clearly give you more details on that, they had added a foyer to the station. Later on in the program, I'm going to be moving the camera around to show you some aspects of it, and if everything goes well, I can show you what is now the foyer. That actually wasn't there when we first built this station. And of course, in 1977, they built the other half of the organization because our services expanded, our membership began to expand, and we actually needed a bigger building. Now, in 1989, we went through a major renovation. They actually stripped this building down to the main load-bearing beams. They converted our attic upstairs into a conference room, and right now it's a conference room / storage, but it's a conference room nonetheless. And down here in the main area, they had created 3 distinct operating studios. Now, prior to the renovation, if visitors wanted to come and operate, they were kind of left out in the open, and we had 3, maybe 4 visiting spots for hams to use. Now, if conditions warranted it, I can get up to 8 operators active here simultaneously. 1 person per band, but still, I can get 8 operators on here using W1AW. Now, when I say using W1AW, I mean just that. The only call sign that is used from here is W1AW. We're not allowed to use our personal calls. We're not allowed to, we're operating to say W1AW / our own call sign. It's strictly W1AW. And that rule even applies to staff and myself and my other operator, Scott, W9RU. We cannot use our personal call signs here. Now, I know some people are probably saying, yes, but at our club station, we can use our personal calls, and that's true. You could. And technically, there's no rule stating that we can't use our call signs here. The reason that we don't allow other call signs use is because it's a memorial station. It's in honor of Hiram Percy Maxim, our founder and first president, that we only allow the use of W1AW. And that's kind of cool when you're operating, because if you like to operate, you like a little bit of that pile-up feeling, or maybe contesting feeling, when you get on the air from here and you say CQ, this is W1AW, after a couple of minutes, assuming conditions are good, you have a pile-up on you. Everyone wants to work W1AW. And when I get visitors in here and they're active as 1AW, I always caution them not to run it contest style. However, you might have to run it contest style simply because you have so many hams calling you at once. But if you just want to have a casual conversation, that's okay too. We never force hands to get on the air from here or make a lot of contacts or anything like that. I want my visitors to have a nice, casual, and fun operating time with me. Now, we deal with the operating. I'm going to show you those students in a little bit, but obviously the primary mission of W1AW is the transmission of code practice and bulletins. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to, if you're listening now, you're probably hearing a code practice. I'm going to try to move this without too much shaking. But I want you to see the equipment that we're using. Now, I can't really open the class doors because the air conditioning system were just totally nasty, but can you kind of see this equipment?
Yes.
Can you see the heaters moving? Okay, maybe, let me try on 160. Can you see that going? Because right now we're at 55 words a minute. You're probably hearing it. But anyway, this is all the equipment that we use for all the code practice and both transmissions. Now I'm not sure if you can see me, I'm going to kind of point down the line here. We have 160, 80, 40, 20, 17, 15, 10, and 2 meters. We're normally on 6 meters as well, 50.250. However, my transmitter suffered a catastrophic failure, and right now we're not on 6. That'll be taken care of tomorrow. So this is all the equipment we use for all those code practice and both in transmission. Now, when we were renovated in 1989, we had all Harris equipment here, all commercial broadcast equipment. And by the way, if I say the word broadcast, please note that I'm saying it in a purely technical sense, because technically we are broadcasting. They're one-way transmissions, which are allowed by Part 97113D. They allow us to provide these one-way transmissions or these broadcasts because we're providing code practice in both in transmissions on a daily basis on a minimum of 6 bands simultaneously using whatever we need to maximize our coverage. So in this case, I'm using high gain antennas and high power. So we are technically broadcasting. But anyway, for the renovation 89, we had Harris commercial gear, which allowed us to do just that. But like anything else, over time, the equipment began to fail. The repairs became more and more expensive. While Harris initially granted us some free repairs, over time they had CEO changes and it was no longer a free ride. And we decided at that time that if we cannot purchase new Harris equipment, we will go back to the amateur manufacturer. And that's what I have here. We initially started testing Ten-Tech Omni 6 Pluses. Then we went with Orion. We had Command amplifiers, single band amplifiers built specifically for us. We finally settled on regular commercial equipment. And the predominant radio here that we're using as an insider is an ICOM. But not surprised us, we actually go to HRO and buy these things off the shelf. But the ICOM for this particular setting for 12, you probably can't see it, but I currently have 3 IC7300s. I have 2 IC7410s. I have 2 IC75603 on 160. Our 6-meter transmitter is a Kenwood TS590. And the big one is the FT5000, the A2, which is on 10 meters. Now for amplifiers, I'm running 4 ACOM 2000A. I have 2 ICOM ICPW1 amplifiers. And on 160, I'm running an Alpha 8410. And of course, that's the amplifier that we showed the key down for full 24 hours with a little brick on it. And we're generally running anywhere from 800 to 1,000 watts into high gain antennas. The only difference with the antennas, obviously, is that they're all single band. We're using wire antennas for 160 and 80 meters. All the other antennas are M-squared, and for 40 meters, we're running the Force 12, the JK style antennas. And that's what we're using right now on 40 meters is the JK402T. That's the 2-element monobander. It has crossed T's on it, so there's no moving parts, there's no coils. It's a full band antenna, and that was actually donated by JK Antennas to us last year. So how are we sounding right now on 40 meters? Is it pretty good?
Excellent.
Too fast.
Pretty good?
URS.
That's cool.
Push the
I'm
top.
looking at home, rarely do I hear it on the other end. Now, I don't know how much cable I have, so hopefully you can see this. You'll see there's 2 monitors. This one here, the one on the left, is the CW computer. This is one used to generate strictly all the CW. In fact, let me just check the video here for a second. Okay, yeah, I think you're seeing it. The monitor with the whiteness on, the yellowness on it is our digital computer. We use FL Digi to send all of our digital transmissions. And the 3 panels that you may see here, let me see if I can move this and drop it a little bit. If you can see that. The second panel is not used anymore. That's when we have the actual commercial broadcast equipment. But one panel is the mixer, that's the audio mixer that we use to take audio from either the digital computer or the microphone, the phone bulletin. The other panel is used to control power to all the transmitters. And that power includes both turning them on and off, as well as the actual keying. We can key all the transmitters simultaneously for testing. If we have to knock the transmitter down, we can just hit one of the toggle switches and the transmitter's off the air. And of course, we monitor our incoming voltage from here as well. Now, I'm going to go back here. Whoop. And have to make sure that the cable is not twisted up or anything. Now, we talked a little bit about the studios, and I wanted to do this when I was telling you about it, but now I'm going to try to do this now. Here we have our first studio. Then we have 2 positions in here. In this studio 1, I think, Paul, you may have been actually in this studio.
Yep.
We have an ICOM IC7700 with W1 amplifier, and we have an FTTX 9000, the Yates tube, and that's tied to the ACOM 2000A amplifier. I tell all my visitors, whether you're a novice or an extra, you can get on the air from here. You're just limited to the bands and modes granted by your licensed class. We have computers used for logging, N1M Logger Plus, and all these systems are networked. So say 3 or 4 of you came up and you want to operate the station, and I had you on 4 distinct bands, you would be able to see where your friend was operating. One of the things I like to do when I have multiple operators on is tell them to let the hands they're working to know where we are on other frequencies, and they'll usually chase us. If I have somebody on 40 meters and 17 meters and 15, well, they'll tell everybody that they're working, oh, by the way, we have stations on these 3 bands. So in the log, you can see a call sign show up 2, if not 3 times, because if they can hear us, they're chasing us and trying to work us. So this is Studio 1. And hopefully I can get this to stretch the cable. It's busy in here. This is a quite busy studio. This is Studio 2, where I have 3 HF operating positions. And please disregard the cables that are kind of hanging all over the place. I have an amplifier I need to install, but I can't install that until I get a new PC, and I can't get the new PC until our IT department develops it for me, so I have to wait. But I have 3 operating positions in here. We have an ICOM IC9100, which is used for both HF as well as satellite work. And supposedly this week there's going to be more SSTV transmissions from the International Space Station. I will actually use that setup to monitor the transmissions from the ISS. We also have an ICOM 7000, which I use more for VHF and UHF. However, that is also set up as an HF operating position. And we have an FT2000, which is the 3rd operating or HF position that's in here as well. We also run our WinLink 2-meter system in here. We are a node on WL2K WinLink 2000, so individuals outside can connect to W1AW-10 to get into the WinLink system to send and receive traffic. We also have our APRS transmitter in here, and the Davis weather system is also beaconing our weather, both the CW ops as well as the APRS network. Now, the last studio, I think I'm at the end of my tether here. The third studio, you probably can't really see it well, but that's the iconic window that everyone uses for pictures. And it's cool because the ironwork that's on the outside has been here since they first built this building. But in this studio, I have a Kenwood TS590, and that's actually hooked up currently to an ISC PW1 amplifier, and the Yaesu FT5000 hooked up with a Quadra. Again, all that is available for visitor operation. Now, I'm not sure how well you can see that. Check. Whoa! You probably have a clear shot of that.
Yeah.
But we have our Mars and our other HF WinLink station and our D-Star radios on this side, and there's also an HF operating system there as well. And that little discrete station on the right, that's where we have our RLP node. We are RLP node 4292 that we have developed primarily for emergency communications use if we need to get it to an affected area. But now it's just kind of there if anybody wants to use it to chat back to friends at home if they have an RLP node. Move it back. Oh, and the one other site, that's you guys there. We have one other operating position in the IC7700 that we do use for visitor operations. So, let's back up. Wait, now it won't work. Here we go. How's that? Is that cool?
Yeah.
So we get anywhere from 500 to almost 1,000 visitors a year. It really varies. We are a seasonal spot. In other words, if you're here during the New England winter, you probably don't see a lot of visitors, and that is really common. We actually don't see our visitor count start to rise until maybe mid to late spring. Around Dayton or Xenia time now, we will see an influx of visitors. And of course, as the year progresses and school lets out and people are starting to travel, that's when you see a lot of visitors come through the station, as well as the organization. In terms of visitors and tours, we have volunteer tour guides that take people through the organization, and eventually they do end up here at the end of the tour. And we do get so many visitors that we actually have to have 2 tour guides on call because we may have buses coming through loaded with club members who just have decided they're all going to get on a bus and just come up here and visit the organization. Now, do you have any questions before I continue?
Any questions?
I know I gave you a lot of information, but is there any questions right now?
Can you hear me over this microphone?
No.
We'll get the questions and repeat them to you, Joe.
Here you go.
Okay. All right. So then I'll wait for that. Now, I briefly mentioned the antennas. We have 4 towers outside the building, and unfortunately, I cannot show you those. But we have one Drone 65, which is actually it's a 120-foot tower. It's actually the bottom section of a broadcast antenna. And we have 3 60-foot SSB self-supporting towers. And all these towers house all antennas for both our regular scheduled transmissions and our visitor operations. Now, the 120-foot, the Drone 65, that has primarily all of the antennas we use for all of our scheduled transmissions. The other towers have antennas for visitor use. And in some cases, I have multiple antennas, and in the case of 20 meters, I have 3 5-element 20-meter antennas. 2 are used for the broadcasts, again, technically we're broadcasting, and 1 is for visitor operations. I have 2 40s, because 1 is used for visitor and the other for bulletins. And I have 3 15. 2 of the 15-meter Yagis are fed in parallel, and those are used for our broadcast, and the others for visitors. And all those antennas, for the most part, are rotatable, and each studio has their own controller. So if the visitor comes in and they want to point the antenna towards Europe, or back home, or over the poles, they can do so. We do all the connecting here for you. So such a visitor comes in, they show us their license, or if they don't have their license but they want to operate, we do check online, check to ensure that the individual is licensed. And everything's okay, we'll put you on the air, we'll kind of show you how you can do it, how to make contacts, and then you're off. Now because we're paid staff, we cannot act as control operators. So if I had, say, a technician come in here, and that technician wanted to operate on 20 meters, if I wasn't paid, I could technically sit right next to them and act as a control operator. But we can't legally do that because of the rules, so that individual will be relegated to the privileges granted by a technician. Now that being said, if that technician came in with, say, a general or an advanced or an extra class license holder, then that tech can operate on those bands granted, assuming that higher license class holder would act as a control operator. Excuse me. So we try to be as accommodating as we could. When visitors come in here, they can operate CW, phone, AM, we run digital communications. We do FTA. If someone wants to pretty much sit there and kind of just click away contact, we do that. We have FLDigi on most of the computers, like SK31 or Olivia or MFSK16. They can do that as well. So again, we try to be as accommodating as we can, because I want the visitors to have a good operating experience when they come here.
Any other questions?
And I see a hand up.
This is more of a comment, but I've contacted W1AW several times, and I've never asked for a QSL card, but you guys seem to really put them out fast, and I want you to know that it is appreciated.
Oh, you are most welcome. In the past, we had required visitors to make out QSL cards for every single contact they made. And sometime around 1999, the individual that I had doing that, who unfortunately passed away, that was Al, NJ1Q, had commented to me that some hands were saying, gosh, I don't need another card from W1AW for a 20-meter phone contact. It's like, okay, that makes sense. And so we decided to, and this was before logbook, or anything actually, we decided that, okay, we still want a QSL, and QSL is still very popular. However, why don't we change the policy a little bit? We will not have the visitors spending all this time making QSL cards up, but we will respond to QSL card requests. So we ask that folks send the stays if they could, but if they don't, we still send the card out to them. So if someone does want a card from us, we just ask they send us their card to the Stacey, and I try to process the cards as quick as I can. But generally, it's every couple of weeks I will process the QSL card. One, because and Scott and I were kind of talking about this earlier today, if I was them, I would like a card back. But two, if I didn't process them in a semi-regular basis, they'd pile up really fast. So we do try to get cards out as soon as we can. Obviously, we use Logbook of the World only, and I will upload contacts from the previous week every Monday. Because all my computers here are networked, and we're keeping a running tally of contacts made for the week, I don't just arbitrarily upload stuff to Logbook on a daily basis, because for those of you who are Logbook of the World users, you know that if you try to do that, TQSL kind of throws it back at you, the contacts, the dupes, and this, that, and the other thing. We don't want to upload excessive data. So we have a set schedule of uploading contacts to log to the world every Monday. But again, I appreciate the sentiment about the QSL cards. Again, we try to get them out as soon as we can.
Got another question for you, John.
Got a question from the audience. How do you have to do anything special to prevent interference between stations? So if you have multiple guest operators operating, do you do any special filtering?
That's a cool question, and yes, there's actually 2 stages of filtering. Between the transceiver and the amplifier, there is an AS419, which is a bandpass filter. That's a low power filter, and they cover 160 through 10. If I have a visitor that say that wants to operate on 17, then I have to break into that antenna path and stick an external filter. But we do have low power bandpass filters that we put between the exciter and the amplifier. And there's also in our racks, and again, it's really hard to show you because of, well, the length of the cable, plus if I open the doors, you're not going to hear anything else. We have the 403A high power bandpass filters. These are large bandpass filters capable of handling 2,500 watts. Those I put in line as well. So a visitor who's operating on 20 meters will have 2 filters in line. A visitor operating on 17 will have 2 visitors in line. Now, all that being said, obviously there's no way to filter out harmonics. For example, if someone is operating at 7.1 megahertz, you're going to hear them at 14.2. There's just no way to filter that out. The antennas are just physically too close to allow for any type of attenuation, any type of buffering between bands. But for close-in stuff, for noise generated, a little bit of phase noise, that filtering does a very good job of keeping the noise down.
Any other questions?
What's the average operating time at a station?
Okay, question from the audience. Approximately, what is the average operating time that a guest operator gets to operate?
The operating times are 10 to 12, and then 1 to 3:45 Monday through Friday. And it's pretty much first come, first served. If someone shows up at the door and it's within that operating period and there's nobody else on the air, if they want to get on, say, 15 meters, I say, sure. I bring them in here and I put them on the air. And if it's in the early morning, they can operate up till 12 p.m. We usually suggest places that people go to lunch if they want to come back at 1, and I can put them right back on the air. So I've actually had visitors who are traveling and who are going to be up in the area for a couple of days. They'll come in at 10 o'clock, work till 12, leave, come back at 1, work till 3:45, and I'll explain why it's a little odd, that cutoff time, on, say, Monday. And then on Tuesday, if they want, they can come back in, come in 10 to 12, and 1 to 3:45 to operate the station. So it's pretty much first come, first served. We don't put any real limits on to how much time somebody can operate. In fact, last week I had a visitor from Milwaukee, and he comes here normally 3 times a year. He's visiting his son in New York, but he will take 2 days out of his schedule to come up here and operate the station. And I love him for that because he runs primarily CW. We don't have a lot of CW operators normally. So when he gets on the air, he's running CW. It's casual CW. He'll have conversations with hams. He puts the station on the air. He has a really nice fist, and he enjoys himself and gets the station out on the air on CW. Now we do have that odd cutoff time of 3:45, and that's because we have to ready the broadcast equipment for the code practice transmission. Now, if you're familiar with our schedule, the schedule states that we start at Eastern time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, but we actually send out 2 CW alerts at 6 minutes before the hour and 2 minutes before the hour. And we do that as a courtesy. We're not required by the FCC to do that, But we do it as a courtesy to let Hampton know we're coming on frequency. So we have that cutoff time of 3:45 where we shut down for physical operation and we get the station ready. Because I can't have transmitters going off at the start of our normally scheduled transmission and say have rigs still active, hooked up to empty, so on, because we just don't want to toast the front end of these things.
Any other questions?
Joe, I'll ask one. What's the strangest question you've ever received during one of these
That's a tough one. I don't know if I've ever got a real strange question. No one asked my height or weight, which was kind of awesome, but I don't think I've ever gotten a strange question. Why? Is there a strange question coming?
lined up for you here.
My name's Norm. The question is, why do you get by with broadcast and some of these other coops can't get by with broadcast? What's different about yours than these other folks? I'm not complaining.
Hear the question.
He's wanting to know why W1AW can broadcast and others who have been cited by the SEC cannot. What allows W1AW to do that?
That's a good question. I mean, that really is a good question. And I can point to Part 97113D. And that rule, now there's a little bit of history of that, but that rule essentially states that the control operator of a bulletin station may receive compensation if they provide a minimum of 40 hours a week code practice, are operating on a minimum of 6 HF medium frequencies simultaneously, have a published schedule that is published 30 days in advance, and use whatever means necessary to maximize the coverage. So technically, the FCC is not saying that it's just W1AW. They're kind of saying that anyone, if they meet this criteria, can provide this service. So if a ham out there wanted to transmit code practice in bulletins, they can do it if they can do it on 6 bands minimum and have a published schedule and so on and so forth. Now, I use the term broadcast, but that is an incredibly narrow definition. When we asked the FCC about this decades ago, because we honestly, we do want to ensure that the station's running properly, what is it that would make us cross the line into generic broadcast? And their answer was very specific. As long as your transmissions are directed solely towards amateur radio operators, then you are not broadcasting. It doesn't matter who the listener is, because again, anyone can listen to these, but it's the content of your transmissions that are specific. So if someone over there at headquarters decided, gosh, why don't we use W1AW to broadcast some information about our books, or maybe membership, that has officially crossed the line into broadcasting, because now that is not necessarily targeted solely towards amateur radio operators. That is targeted to anyone that may be listening. So the FCC hasn't said it's just W1AW. The origin of that rule is because of W1AW. Some of you may remember, if you use Tune the World with amateur radio, and I remember this because it sticks out in my head, they talked about pecuniary interest. At the time, and this is the very early 70s, when we really began to see an explosion of what we were doing here, we had gone to the FCC and said, okay, we're an amateur radio organization, we're a sister society of the International Amateur Radio Union. We have been providing these transmissions since before 1938, but we're also a company operating within the state of Connecticut. We cannot ask people to volunteer to work, so we have to pay them. So how do we work this out? How do we provide a payment to a control operator, but also operate within Part 97, the FCC rules. So, as how was explained to me, the FCC came up with, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, you can legally pay your operator, and you are not in violation of pecuniary rules set forth by Part 97. So, again, anyone can do this, and I imagine you're probably talking about a certain ham located in a New England state. I'll put it that way. I'm not mentioning any names. My buddy, but I'm not mentioning any names. The issue there was he was in violation of the rules. And when he tried to say, whoa, W1AW does it, the FCC would come back and say, no, W1AW does not do what you're doing, because he would come on frequency off his schedule. He had a published schedule. And he happened to come on frequency right around the time these 2 or 3 other amateurs happened to be on that same frequency. And he would start with his transmissions. So he was coming on off schedule. He was coming on a frequency not in his schedule. He was coming on frequency at a time when these 2 or 3 hams just happened to show up at the same time. And he was advertising for merchandise. The other issue was the control of the station. We have to physically be here at all times when that master TR switch is up. We have to be here. We cannot, I mean, we can go over to the main building for a couple of minutes, we have to pick up mail or something, but we cannot start up the transmitters and go and have dinner or lunch or anything like that. We have to physically be here. At night, I have my operator, Scott, W1AW, who is here at all times when we're transmitting. We have to manually put these things into transmit mode. The individual had an aftermarket timer, which was just happened to come on at a certain time. And during an investigation by the FCC, the system kind of hiccuped, and it locked into this 40-second transmit cycle. And about 40 seconds of this audio was continuously transmitted on a loop over amateur frequencies. So there was clearly a rules violation. He didn't even abide by his own schedule, let alone the schedule or the content of his transmission. So he was not allowed to do that. But there are other individuals around the country that do provide on a smaller scale these types of transmissions. They might be on, say, 1 or 2 bands. They might be providing code practice to a local group of hams on, say, 10 meters, or they're doing it on 2 meters. So that's perfectly acceptable. But to make a very long story kind of short, the only issue the FCC has is that if a station wants to do this, they just have to follow these rules. And if they follow these rules, which is what we painstakingly try to do, then they can provide these styles of transmissions.
Thank you.
Again, I didn't say anybody's name though, so
You coming, Jake? Joe, I think our questions are limited because you've done such a great job explaining everything about the station. But we still have one more question for you.
oh, that's cool.
Good program. Question is about the directional antennas that you use for your broadcast. Do you use like 320-meter Yagis simultaneously? And if so, how are they? What directions are they set up for?
Okay, I heard that one. All the antennas are monoband antennas, with the exception of 160 and 80. On 160, we're essentially running a dipole, which is fed atop our 120-foot tower. And on 80 meters, and that has a kind of a northeast, southwest orientation. And we're essentially limited to where we can tie it off, that's the only reason. And we have a 4-wire cage for 80 meters. And we have the cage strictly for bandwidth, because I'm operating at 3581.5 and then 3990. That antenna is oriented so we have coverage east and west. Now, for 20 meters, I'm using two 5 LED Aggies at about 40 feet and about 70 feet or so. And they have a beam, these are the M-squared antennas, the 20 M5s, and they have a beam width of about 50 degrees. So we have them oriented as such to where their half power points, their 3 dB points, intersect. So I will have coverage on 20 meters from, say, VE3 all the way, maybe VE2, all the way down to, say, the panhandle of Florida on 20 meters. So I have a little bit of overlap. I mean, obviously the 3 dB points have a kind of a west-southwest direction to them, but they still hear us on 20 meters just because it's just so much power we're dumping into them. Generally, because we're out here in the East Coast, generally all of our antennas are oriented to cover the United States. On 17 meters, for example, I have an antenna that is pointed almost due 270 degrees, but because of its beam width, that is close to, I think that was close to 65. I have coverage like into upper state New York and down to, say, the Georgia area. Give or take, and again, we're talking the half power points. But again, everything is oriented so where we can pretty much cover all of the United States. On 20 meters, there's 2 antennas. On 15, there's 2 antennas. All the other bands, they're all single antennas.
Any other questions?
Well, this is the least questions I've heard from this crowd. Very good job. Good job.
That's cool. That's cool.
Very good. Joe, thank you very much. This has been a fantastic program, and we appreciate you taking the time this evening, and for Paul for getting with you and arranging this. Whenever Paul is on up there, when he ventures up that way, he lets us know. He's spotty, and
We always, he always gets a pileup from Foreland especially.
Nice. Well, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to showcase W1AW. She is our baby, she's my baby, and Paul and I have had these conversations a lot in the past when he's been up here, that we want to do, I want to do this because I know that there are a lot of hams that may never have the opportunity to come up here to the ARL, especially to W1AW. And when we get these opportunities to showcase the station, because really this is easy to do. We have the technology. I think it's important because we get to showcase W1AW for those who may never have an opportunity to see it. So I thank you very much for letting me bend your ears for what, every 45 minutes today or this evening to talk about the station because we're really proud of her. I'm proud of her as well.
what you're probably going to do
Is create more visitors knocking on your door, wanting to operate now.
That's cool.
I know,
I
I'd
have
love
no
to.
problem with that. I would, you know what, if we can fry the ionosphere a little bit more with more RF, because as Paul can attest, I throw you guys on the amplifiers, and you're in high gain antennas. So you're looking at ERP levels of the literally 4,000 plus watts. So, you know, whatever kickstarts the ionosphere, if we can do it from here, that would be cool. Otherwise, I have no control over propagation, despite the room that's out there.
We do need the bands.
Simple.
All right, any final comments for Joe?
Any rumors on the 2020 ARRL annual operating event?
I don't know if you heard that or not. Any rumors on the 2020 ARRL operating event?
Yes, I'm not sure if we have one. We're still working on the 2019 hopefully HPM 150 operating event. As I mentioned earlier, this is Harm Percy Maxim's, it's the 150th anniversary of his birth, and in the past, we had run these HPM events. We started with the 125th anniversary of his birth, where ARL members, ARL field appointees, you have to be within the ARL, could affix at the time, stroke 125 to your call. And if you work a whole bunch of other 125s, we have certificates for you. And then we do 126 and 127, then activity kind of starts to peter out. So we went on the 5s. We did 130 and 135 and then 140. We did not do HPM 145 because that happened to occur at the time of our centennial in 2014. And at that time, W1AW, as you may know, was farmed out to every state twice in a year. And here we were running a W100AW, which, by the way, that was like pulling teeth to get the FCC to okay that. I cannot tell you how many times they just said, no, you're not running W100AW. I don't know what they did, but they found that to get the FCC to okay that with restrictions, obviously. But now we're coming up to HPM 150, and it's my hope that, because it is a significant number, it is 150, that we're going to go through with that particular operating event. And again, that will be open to ARL members who have field appointments. They could be QSL bureau managers, state section managers, ECs, SDMs, VCs. If you have an appointment, you should be able to affix 150 to your call sign. And if we do run that, it'll be in September, because we run it in time of Highland First Maximum birth, which is again September 2nd. For 2020, again, to be honest with you, if they're cooking up something, they are tight-lipped about it. And I hope they're doing something. I hope there's somebody over there thinking, yeah, let's do this for 120 or 2020, because as we found out from the Centennial and POTA, and even to a lesser extent, the grid chase, these operating events are extremely popular with the amateur population. They love it. The Centennial, let's talk about that for a little bit. When we first came up with the idea, we thought, okay, this would be cool, give out the call sign, it's celebrating the ARL's 100th anniversary. We'll give out the call sign twice each state throughout the year. You know, they'll make some QSOs. I mean, how many QSOs could they honestly make? Because we thought maybe by the time the 50th state had run for its first time, activity would start to die off. No, that was the case. It only increased the competitions between state operations, where we ended up with over 3.5 million contacts made during the centennial year. And we did not expect something like that to be that popular. Sure, there were some hams that were kind of disgruntled because it was not a contest, it was purely an operating event, and hams were operating on 17, 30, and 12, and so on. So there was a little bit of disgruntledness within the community, but really it was all noise level. But it was such a popular operating event, it's almost like, great, what are we going to do now? Because people ask that same question. What do you have planned for next year? So we had NPOTA, the National Parks on the Air, which a number of us, including myself, had participated in. And of course, we had the grid chase. So I'm hoping that the powers that be over there are cooking up something for next year. That would be kind of cool, because these operating events are extremely popular. And it gets hams on the air. It gives new hams an opportunity to play because there's a specific reason for them to be on the air. So my fingers are crossed.
Okay, we have one more question for you.
Well, it's more of a comment, but Vicki and myself went up 2 summers ago, and for VLB and 84 PZ, we had a good time up there. But what I wanted to make a note of was how exceptional the staff was and accommodating and friendly. Whether we toured either building, let us know anything we wanted to know, everything we wanted to know. And Joe let us operate. I made a pile of, or a boatload of contacts on one of the operating positions. But just the staff, I couldn't be more, happy with how they treated us, and certainly goes for Joe, mostly.
Well, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. that is really nice to hear, and it's nice to hear that the staff treated you properly. And to lay it out on the table, a lot of us are just hams. We're just staff. We're just trying to do our job. We're trying to accommodate the membership, but even non-members, because it's that old, what attracts the flies, honey or vinegar. If we had a high opinion, and this is just my thought, this is not the organization, but if we had a high opinion of ourselves and we tried to distinguish between members or non-members of the organization, then what are we doing to benefit amateur radio? Dave Sumner, K1ZZ, said a number of years ago that, because we're involved in like these REDX surveys, that there are things that we do that does not benefit the membership necessarily, but benefit amateur radio, and we have to do those things. And so, because if it benefits amateur radio, it benefits the organization. If it benefits the organization, it benefits amateur radio. So the two are hand in hand. So the staff know that when folks come to the door, they're here for a reason. We all have this common thing, and that is amateur radio. And so they can't but help to be as helpful as they can. Because, well, again, you made the trek up here, and we can't treat you like, well, I'm too busy or I'm too important to help you. So you will always get that with staff. Are there hams out there that kind of make us want to pull out our hair and bang our head against the wall? Of course. You're going to get that. But you will not see that in the interaction, whether it be face-to-face, telephone, or email. Because, again, we all have something common, and that is the amateur radio. So I sincerely appreciate those comments because they really do try their best. They want to help hams that come to the door.
Last call, any other questions?
What do they do during a lightning storm?
What do you think during a lightning storm?
Run down the basement. I get. We actually have antenna boxes. There are polyphaser lightning arresters that are mounted on a ground plane, and those are connected to a ground rod. Every leg on the tower has its own ground rod. I do not daisy chain the grounds. I'm the schooling of more wire means more impedance means above ground. So every tower leg has its own ground, an 8-foot ground rod. The guy wire fences are grounded as well, and the guy wires are connected to the fence to their own ground system. The antennas come into a very large ground plane with bulkhead connectors down in my cellar. And that ground plane is connected to the grounding of the station, which consists of two 8-foot ground rods on either side of the building, connected with a 2-inch copper strap. That ground plane is connected to that ground, as well as the water ground and the service ground. Our telephone is through fiber, so there's no telephone system to ground anymore. And all the stations here are tied to that main ground strap. And if there's a screw on the back of a computer or a mount, whatever, I can ground it, it goes to that ground strap. Now, normally all the antennas are physically disconnected, with the exception of the antennas we use for all of our scheduled transmissions. I'm going to try to move this. I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if I can see it over here. If you look, you'll see a number of cables that kind of, you also see a little blinking light. That'll kind of give you some idea. But you see a bunch of looped cables. Those are the connections for all the broadcast transmitters. The panel next to it that has all the bulkhead connectors, those are all the connections for the antennas as well as all the radios. So everything is physically disconnected, again, save for the bulletin antennas, because we have to keep those running. And even if there happens to be a thunderstorm with lightning nearby, unless something catastrophic may happen, we are still transmitting, so we will not go off the air. The only time that we would go off the air for weather is generally for snow. Like this past February, we had a scheduled presentation, but the organization had shut down early because we had a severe snowstorm coming, and the governor at the time was asking to close, because we learned in the past that if you don't let the companies close early, everyone gets out at 4 o'clock, heavy snow, and it's just a log jam just trying to get out of the city. So unless it's a weather situation like that, we will stay on the air even during a thunderstorm. And I know we've taken hits in the past. In fact, we actually took a hit in June of 2006, which occurred just after 4 p.m. And I know that was the date because it was an early June storm. We had staff underneath the overhang on the outside of the building because the rain was coming down in buckets and it was thundering. And staff actually saw the 120-volt tower take a lightning strike. And the only damage we sustained was a popped capacitor in the rotator, and the concrete around one of the legs, the fence around the tower, was blown off. And the moss that had naturally grew around the fence was kind of blown off. And what we theorized happened is that the lightning did exactly what we wanted it to do, and that was to travel on the outside of the tower. It jumped to that fence leg, instantly vaporized the water, blew up the concrete, and the moisture in the ground kind of blew up all the moss. So we had taken the lightning strike, and we were transmitting, and we didn't notice anything occurring here that there was any indication. I mean, we heard it, obviously, because it was literally 50 feet away, but we didn't sustain any damage. But again, we will stay on the air unless it's something really significant where we are forced to go off the air, even in thunderstorms.
All right, let's give Joe a big round of applause.